My first guest this week is Jeremy Adams, a high school teacher, university professor, and author of the new book, Hollowed Out, a warning about America's next generation. The book is being released this Tuesday, August 3rd. And as he states, teachers have a front row seat to America's decline. And in the book, he illuminates the problem and demands we address it. Here is the first segment of our interview. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be on with you.
So your book, Hollowed Out, a warning about America's next generation, is, as it states, a warning. And you open the book by describing the thing you do to start your classes that I thought was really telling. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. Well, as a teacher, I've been a high school teacher for almost a quarter of a century. And one of the little lessons, one of the nuggets of wisdom I've acquired is you got to have a good first day. So if you want to do something, you want to be funny and engaging, and nobody wants the first day to be a bunch of syllabus, and testing policies and all that, stuff that's no fun. So I decided to say, okay, well, I want to see what kind of students I'm dealing with here, right? So what do you guys know? How much do you know of politics? And, because that's what I teach is government and political science. And so what I would do is I would project a picture of different people on the front of the board, right, on the projector. And I always just said, I just want to know how much you guys know about politics so I know what I'm working with here. And so I would project a picture of, Nancy Pelosi. And keep in mind, I teach honor students. I teach college kids. And maybe 2 or 3 hands. And I'm talking about, I'm in California, so I have huge classes, right? So I have 35, 45 students. 3 or 4 people know who the Speaker of the House is. I mean, second in line to be president, the most powerful person, the most powerful branch. No idea. Then I put a picture of Miley Cyrus, and everybody's hand goes up. And by the way, just to be clear, we're talking about kind of the clean Hannah Montana Miley Cyrus, not the kind of, not the twerking, not the twerking BMA. Yeah, exactly. And so I would, as the years went on, we'd go to Paul Ryan or John Boehner, and the celebrities change, of course. But everybody knows the YouTube sensations. They all know who's on the front of People magazine. They have the one that really shocked me was the Vice President of the United States. So their basic experience of what they're absorbing in the world is so radically different than what I think adults think that they are absorbing and what they know and how they spend their time. I think it's absolutely shocking. And so, this book, I think the word warning is true. I think most decent, hardworking, average Americans are probably absolutely clueless about the kind of values, behavior, and attachments that our young people are forming today. And that's why, the lack of them is why they are hollowed out. So I can't wait to talk about it. And so that's kind of a way of drawing in the audience and giving you a really powerful demonstration of why they're hollowed out.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I loved it because I'm always screaming, we need to pay attention to the next generation. And people just kind of hem and haw and like, well, I'm focused on the next election, or, it can't really be that bad. And 2, how bad it could be. You say that too many lack the internal resources to provide their own happiness. And you write this, I love it. It's a kind of long quote, but it's so good I had to read this. A few examples that form an unhappy picture. Many students today show little interest in getting married or starting families. Children are anathema to the students' ubiquitous environmental puritanism and their equally ubiquitous self-absorption. Many refuse to say the Pledge of Allegiance, even labeling it vaguely fascistic. They snicker outright at the very hollowed out notion of patriotism. Their view of America is nihilistic and myopic, and nihilism is not generally a healthy state of mind. They are shockingly ignorant about the world's major religions and stridently secular in their morality. And it goes on and on from there. This is scathing in a sense, and you talk about the problems of them wanting to grow up. So it's really bad, and I think people need to focus on it, but this didn't happen overnight. So how did we get here?
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, I want to be very clear from the outset. This is, it sounds like I'm being, really critical of, kind of young Americans and people in my classroom. It's actually not. It's a criticism of you and me. It's a criticism of the adults in our society that have allowed this to happen. And that's why, I'll be honest, Charles, typically a really big, ambitious book where the author is trying to say, look, there is a profoundly big problem coming down the tracks and nobody's paying attention. You know what? maybe one of my author frustration coming out here, almost all of those people who write those bestsellers are already famous. They are politicians, they are pundits, they're Instagram influencers, they, write for the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. And yet the point of my book is that we shouldn't be listening to them. We should be listening to the people who have a front row seat to American decline, because we're seeing all the things that you just described, because we are in the trenches. And I know many of the teachers out there and the high school teachers, elementary school teachers, we don't have a huge forum. We don't have a megaphone. We don't have 1 million Twitter followers. We don't have a popular podcast. And yet we want to wave our hands and say, look, folks, something is deeply wrong here. And just to kind of give some detail to what you're talking about, I think most people have no idea how completely untethered young Americans are to adult values, adult expectations, and adult role models. They spend, and this figure is before the pandemic, they spend 9 or 10 hours a day on their devices. And what does that mean? That means they're not dating, they're not reading books, they're not going out to the movies, they're not going to football games. A lot of them have absolutely it's not that they are secular and that they don't go to church, because, well, they don't. But what bothers me is their complete ignorance of the world's great religions and, their loneliness, their despair, the increasing rates of suicide. This is a very unhappy generation. 1 in 5 millennials don't have a friend in the entire world, they claim. Half of all 18 to 34-year-olds don't have a romantic partner. And so we're looking at a generation. What do I mean by hollowed out? I mean, the things that fill in life, that make it meaningful, that make it good, that allow us to use the term of the ancient philosophers to allow human beings to flourish. Those habits and behaviors are not there. And we adults are not insisting on them. And that's why they are hollowed out. It's our fault. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it makes total sense. And you say, like, to the book part, one of the reasons why I think this book the book is great, because the book is great, but why it's so important is because I talk a lot about culture and education. Those are the 2 topics I talk about the most. And there are a lot of great books out there that point out some of this stuff. And I've challenged some of the authors when I've had them on. I'm like, look, I love what you do, but go talk to your friends. What I need and what the culture needs, society needs, is these books aren't written for us. So what happens is you get a lot of academics writing these books, like you talk about celebrities, politicians, all that kind of thing. But we get a lot of academics writing books, and they write books for other academics. Yes, exactly. So you have the guy from Harvard reading the guy from Princeton's book talking about, I disagree because of this, so I'm going to write a counter book, or saying he made a great point. Did you see this, professor from Stanford? Yes, I did see this. Realizing that they're so right, and it's really important, but no one's going to hear it, because the average person, we don't read anymore. We'll get to that problem. But those who read aren't reading the people. Because let's be real. And it's not even a knock, it's the way you're trained. We all do things the way we're trained. If you cook with your basic training. If you're an engineer, you use your training. So if I was a smart student, went to a top school, and then I went to an elite college, and then I got a PhD from that elite college, I write a certain way. So they're not writing in a way that the average person would want to read if they read it. It's like, I don't get it. And I think that someone in that ivory tower, because there's a lot of them out there who write some really good books, need to start writing books for us normals. And I think this book is like that. I think it's approachable and people will get it. And I think that's part of the problem. You say, who's doing the talking, but it's also how they're talking.
Let me just say, that was the gospel in my heart. That is exactly right, is that who has the big megaphone in our society? And you're right, they write these great books. So let me just tell all your listeners, I've read the books and distilled it and made it more interesting in the book. So don't worry about those books. My book, I try to absorb those ideas. You're right. There are a lot of great books out there, but you're right. I didn't write this book to be cute. I didn't write this book to make money, which is really good because I probably won't. I wrote this book because I'm a passionate believer in this country and in the potentiality of our young people. And they're absolutely off track. Now, do I wish that there was, did I wish Ben Shapiro, or do I wish that Barack Obama, do I wish that somebody who had a massive megaphone would have written this book? I do. But you know what? At some point, you have to say, you know what? If I have a high mountain to climb to get the message out, I'll do it. And so, yeah, the problem is, and you're absolutely right about this, the problem is that when it comes to the culture, young people are going to be influenced. They are going to absorb values. They are going to acquire opinions from somewhere. And the problem is, as the adults have stepped back, social media, their devices, cable news, all of this has stepped forward instead. Let me give you a quick story about this.
And when we come back, we get to Jeremy's example about the influences on the youth and how they've changed, and not for the better. More with Jeremy Adams, author of Hollowed Out. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
And I just can't remember her name.
Now, more of The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer, with your host, Charles Love.
Welcome back. I am continuing my conversation with Jeremy Adams, high school teacher and author of the new book, Hollowed Out. In the last segment, he set the groundwork, explaining to us what hollowed out means, and started to describe the problems and the differences between past generations and this next generation. He ended the last segment with a story. He was talking about kids are going to be influenced anyway, but there's a difference between the way they used to be influenced and now, and he was going to tell a story. Here's that story.
When I first started teaching, high school kids, my college kids would raise their hand and would be talking about a political issue. And they frequently said, well, my dad says this or my mom says this. And that's because they're talking to their mom and dad. Their parents are there, right? They're talking about current events. I never hear anybody talking about that anymore. They're talking about LeBron James. They're talking about, a Twitter trendsetter. But this idea that we are going to acquire wisdom and a sense of how to be good men and women of the world through our parents and our pastors and our friends and our teachers, we're getting displaced by voices and values that are not going to lead to a good and meaningful life. And it's certainly, we are certainly not going to be able to be a successful, multicultural, pluralistic, liberal society if we don't absorb the values that are consistent with being able to discuss, tolerate, form consensus, and have a common bond of unity.
Back to those adults in the room. You talk about the importance of high expectations, because I want to get a little bit into the things that these kids are, some of it's their fault and some of it's not. And the things that we're doing to, at the very least, promote this bad behavior and this lack of knowledge. So obviously, I guess I want to go there. I was going to wait till later. So there's a role that the teacher needs to play. And we blame them for part of not doing a good job of certain things. That's not their fault because that's not what they should be doing. But then there's a problem there too. So it's kind of a thing, because one of the things I before we started, I said I was going to get to one thing that you pointed out in the book. I was going to wait for a later segment, but I think I want to go there now. I always say that education is more important than all these other things, and we should focus on it. And to conservatives, I say it's the hill you should be willing to die on. I'm like, that's how you're going to change and address the future generations. But you kind of took me and people like me to task a little bit in the school, but not totally, because I'm not one of these people, because you point out the people who think education is some magic bullet. You said there's no silver bullet, and that we want the teachers to be the end all, to fix all the problems, to deal with all this other stuff. And you soberly say that people fall prey to the magical solution illusion in education. So talk about that, and then I'll tell you what my issue with education is.
Absolutely. Well, let me just start by saying we are now at the tail end of 20 years of public policy reform at the state and national level of this country, where we bought into an axiom that I think has obviously been proven false. And that axiom is that if we could just have better teachers, then we would have better educational outcomes. And the problem with that is twofold. The first problem is that inputs matter more than people think. I would like to tell you that, the teaching awards I've won and the good test scores I sometimes have, it's all because I'm so great, Charles. I'm the best teacher. Look at me. And yet I will tell you that some of the most heroic teaching in this country is done by teachers who probably get really bad test scores. And the reason for that is the most valuable thing, and the fancy word for this in educationese is schema. Schema is your habits and your values and your knowledge when you walk into a classroom. And I have a lot of students who value what we do before I even talk to them. And there is no replacement for that. When I have a kid who walks in and knows or believes, and maybe they're Machiavellian, maybe they just want to get into a good school and they want to get an A. So, just Mr. Adams, sing, entertain me, and tell me the answers to the test. Or you do have a kid who believes in the magical melody of America and understands I need to acquire, knowledge and habits that allows me to sing that loudly in the future. Whether or not you're a realistic or you're a romantic student, you believe in the value of what we're doing in a classroom. That comes before it gets to me, right? So before you even get my classroom, if you value what we're going to be doing, that is 90% of the success. There's been a lot of research done about, well, how effective can a teacher be? I'm not saying that there is not the occasional teacher that doesn't absolutely be the difference in a child's life. I mean, again, I'm a non-apologetic romantic of the classroom. I do believe that there are kids who are essentially not on the right track, whose trajectory is negative, and they meet that magical teacher. I think all of us have had one or two people in our lives that we know essentially alter the trajectory of our lives for the better. So I believe in that magic. I am not a cynic. I am not a skeptic. I am a romantic. But as a matter of policy, about 10%, that's how much an individual teachers make in the difference of a student's academic outcomes. It's all the stuff that comes before. Does the student value education? Do they have good time management? Do they want to go to college? Do they know how to study? Do they know how to take notes? Are they the kind of students who are curious? And I have nothing to do with that. Now, I can cultivate it 1 hour a day for 180 days. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there was a statistic, I forget the exact number, but between 0 to 18 years old, from the moment you're born to the time you're 18, you only spend about 2% of your time in school. So, or maybe it's 5%. But the broader point is 90 to 95% of your life is not in school. And when you are bombarded with negative images, negative values, when you're not encouraged, when people don't believe in you, because at the end of the day, the most powerful teachers believe in their students. When you come from a background where nobody believes in you and they're not modeling good adult behavior, it's really hard to expect our educational systems to make up for that. Does that make any sense?
Oh, it makes total sense. I feel better because I don't think I have to change why I made education so important. I didn't think it was going to fix anything, but I'll get to that shortly. But I just want to quickly say, when you take that policy back to the policy piece to task, you're talking about them thinking that either No Child Left Behind on the one side or Common Core on the other side, or all these policy issues are going to solve the problem. So talk about the problems with that briefly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this idea that, what we do in the school, literally No Child Left Behind said, well, if everybody is highly qualified and they're better credentialed, that's going to fix the problem. Or Common Core, which is that, we're not going to worry so much about content. We're going to worry about higher order thinking, and we're going to worry about skills instead. I don't want to say those things aren't important and they don't make differences, but I'll tell you right now, what would make the biggest difference of all is if we allowed teachers to really pivot and to say, look, and let me kind of put on some teacher pride right now. Where our society has fallen down, I mean, think about this. A lot of our students can't get a meal at home. I mean, this idea that schools are simply academic institutions is wrong. We provide 3 meals a day at my high school. We provide counseling services. Why? Because the kids are constantly inundated with anxiety. I have stories that will make your skin crawl of young men who don't come to school some days. And then when I say, where have you been? They say, well, my mom's boyfriend is violent and I have to stay home to protect them. I mean, the world that our kids are coming from before they enter our classroom is unspeakably difficult. And that's why I say most average Americans who are not in the trenches, aren't talking to these young people, and that's why I say it's not their fault. Those are the things that they're coming to the school with. And so we in the trenches, we have to deal with that because a kid can't learn if they're hungry. A kid can't learn if they're scared. And where I take exception is, we call a lot of this social emotional learning, which is very fashionable right now, which is, we're not just worried about the academic part of a student's life. We're also worried about their well-being, their emotional health, which I agree with. But my problem is a lot of people believe that that's where education should stop nowadays, that education really should be more therapeutic than academic. And what I would say is you make them feel protected and fed and all of that so that we can then pivot and set high expectations and do great things in the classroom. I mean, think about it this way. I don't like boxing, but I've always thought this is a great analogy. What happens, Charles, at the end of a round? Like what happens at the end of a round of boxing?
They go back to the corner.
They go back to, who's there?
Their trainer.
Right. And what are they saying to them?
They're giving them pointers and tips of what they do and telling them what they did wrong and what they should do next.
Exactly. Right. So because they just got the hell beat out of them, for a round. And yet they come home, they come back to the corner and they get some water, they get taped up, they get some good advice, and they go out into the world again. You know what? I want you to imagine boxing and you go to the corner and nobody's there for you. There's no water. There's no advice. There's no love. And you compare that to somebody who has all of those things, like my kids. You know, my kids, when they complain, I'm like, you have no idea how tough some kids have it. Imagine how hard it is to go through life when you're battered and beat up every day and you go home and you go to the corner and either your parents aren't there because they're working 3 jobs, or they're distracted because they're on their phones. We could talk about that too. You know, how distracted we are as a generation of parents. And so, you know, as educators, man, it is hard to teach today. The job is tough, and it's getting tougher because, again, you got to be therapeutic, and we can't forget the academics, because that's what's going to allow them to soar no matter where they come.
Coming up, more with Jeremy Adams, high school teacher and author of Hollowed Out. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, more of The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer, with your host, Charles Love.
Welcome back. I am continuing my conversation with Jeremy Adams, high school teacher and author of the new book, Hollowed Out. Earlier, he was pointing out that teachers can't fix everything, and they have a lot of outside things to deal with. I agree, but believe the youth would be better off if teachers held them accountable, taught them the classic, didn't indoctrinate, and made them question. And in this segment, I address his earlier point that they don't know anything about politics or religion, and what I think the most troubling part of this is. The problem is that they have no belief, worse than no belief. They don't care about foundational things. So generations ago, you could be extremely pro-socialism and left the government to fix it. You could be extremely conservative as we define them today, but you still thought about the greater good, or how I can be a better man, or you thought about what society needed. Now, they don't really care. And no one's there to say, you should care, and this is why you should care, and here's some great books that point that out. In fact, we have a lot of this push in education now where they hate the great books. So that is what I mean by education being a problem. As much as that stuff is coming to you, is not your fault as a teacher, totally true. You have to do the best you can with what you have. And part of that is not changing what your foundation and what your core to teaching is, what's gotten you there, what's been successful for 20 years. Keep doing that regardless of the situations. So what do you think about that?
No, I agree. I would say that, you know, there is a middle ground, I think, between being understanding, being empathetic, being socially, emotionally aware. I mean, this is where, you know, my dad was a teacher, and I think that they probably weren't sensitive enough to the difficulties of their students. You know, my dad, and you know, he'll never listen to this podcast, so I can talk about him a little bit. You know, my dad used to have this thing where if a kid showed up late, he'd get on it. And I had my dad as a teacher. Let me tell you, that wasn't a lot of fun sometimes. But he was old school tough. And a kid would kind of give an excuse to you, say, I don't care. It's on you. You figure it out. And I understand why he did that, because in life you're going to have to. But I would never say that today. I mean, a lot of my students are watching their younger siblings. They're having to take them. They're having to, deal with an elderly grandparent. So I think there is that piece of understanding that I think that we do. What bothers me, my friend, is that we don't then say, okay, we understand, but you still have to do these things because, like you talked about, high expectations. Every teacher I know who really finds meaning in their work, who sees it as an anchor of their identity, we don't talk about money. We don't talk about awards. You know what we talk about? We talk about those kids who come back years later. That is like our Oscar, our Emmy, our Grammy, our Nobel Prize, because those kids come back. And because here's the thing, you can't listen to what a kid says when they're 17 because they're 17, right? And the magic for us is when a kid comes back at 23 or 25 or, man, I have students, former students now in their mid-30s, which makes me feel awful. But they'll come back. And you know what they've never said to me, Charles? They've never said, you know what, thanks for understanding me. No, they say, thanks for understanding me, but then believing in me enough to allow me to achieve things and to dream about things that I otherwise wouldn't. Nobody has ever come back and said, thanks for going easy on me. Thanks for not being annoyed when I didn't do well. No. Nobody ever thanks a teacher for that. And that's why you're so right. Those high expectations, they feel like a burden at 18. But you know what? They're the elixir of life when you're 50. And I want them to know that. To your other point, again, I could go on about this forever, so I'm going to be concise. no understanding of foundational things. I wrote that down. I would have stolen it if I was writing a book right now. You're right. The framers of this country, even Lincoln in his Lyceum address, understood that we are at a very small point in human history where our way of life seems normal, right? This idea of democracy, this idea of human rights, this idea of a free market system, this idea of peace, this idea of education for all. We are living in the absolute outlier of human history. Our way of life today, which you and I didn't do much to, I mean, we got this amazing life. I mean, I think I don't even think it's a fight. If you are born in a Western country today, you are the healthiest, wealthiest, luckiest human being to ever walk the face of the planet. But young people have no idea how that came to be, the institutions and the sacrifices that had to be created for that to happen. And so it's important to renew those habits, renew those values, because I would tell you, I don't think our way of life is natural. I do believe in natural right, but it took tremendous sacrifice and work by people who we don't even know their names in order to give us these blessings. And if you don't go to the source, if you don't understand where did democracy come from, where did the Republic come from, what did the Enlightenment believe, why did the framers do what they did? Why is it on the back of the $1 bill, Charles? They saw that we had to put that Latin phrase, Novius Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages, something unique, something different in the annals of human civilization. And so my worry is, you're right, when you have no understanding of foundational things, you're not going to acquire the worldview and the values that allow us to renew our way of life. And that's why I say there's really two crises in the making. One is on an individual level, the kids they're not happy, their mental health is horrible, suicide, anxiety, self-harm is higher than it's ever been. But also, as a civilization in politics, self-government means more than just voting every 4 years. And if you don't have those habits, I don't know how the American experiment can survive.
Coming up, more with Jeremy Adams, high school teacher and author of Hollowed Out. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
The Charles Love Show continues on AM 560, The Answer. Here's Charles Love.
Welcome back. I am continuing my conversation with Jeremy Adams, author of the new book, Hollowed Out, which is coming out this Tuesday, August 3rd. And here we talk about both from the teacher and the youth side, how the teachers, many of them think that there's a problem with the youth, but they just throw their hands up and give in and teach them the things that they want to hear, which is troublesome, and how it's dangerous for the youth to believe that you can place them in any time in history and they would think and act the same way that they do now. They're molding what they're against because they don't want to push back against it. And it's going to be bad for us all when the next generation, our future leaders, our next politicians and judges are people who think this way and they could have done something. They were guarding the gate and they just said, well, it's easier just not to.
That's absolutely right. Guarding the gate. There's something else I would steal. Can I tell you about the habit that drives me the most crazy about my children as well, by the way? A lot of people think this book is about the frustrations of Mr. Adams, high school and college government teacher. That's true. I mean, this whole book is because of, I talk to my students a lot. I get to know them a lot. I have a great deal of affection for them. In the last 5 or 10 years, they'll say things and do things. You're like, that's weird. That's different. That's not the way I've always assumed it. But there's another part of this book. As a dad, oh my goodness gracious, it drives me up the wall because we have these conversations that I've had to stop talking about politics with my 18-year-old daughter. I have to stop because it was really kind of starting to do some damage in our relationship because she watches these videos over and over and over again. And I think what happens is she's acquired, and I think she's better at this than she used to be, but a lot of this generation, their worst habit is they absolutely cannot understand that we are all historically conditioned. We are all products of our time. There are kids who truly believe that if they were born 300 years ago in Guatemala, that they would have the same view that a woke 18-year-old has in America in 2021. It's like, are you like, it is maddening. And yet they believe that. And I say to them, look, if you think that you would have the same views about justice and God and race and gender and economics, whatever, I mean, we all have a million opinions. If you think you would have the same opinions 300 years ago, fine, then tell me, what is the fashionable opinion in 2250? Go. Tell me, kids.
Right.
I mean, because you're going to be judged, right? We are all in the stream of history. And yet sometimes young people feel like they are omnisciently above it, looking down, objectively condemning everybody that came before. I remember I had this magical moment in college where I was reading The Allegory in the Cave by Plato. And I remember it impacted me so much, this idea that we think that everything we see is true, but we're probably just looking at shadows. And I remember thinking, this guy has been dead for 2,500 years, and yet he's getting this extraordinary response out of a college kid in 1995. How magical is that? And so it hurts me when young people think that anything that came before them is not worthy. Why engage in that? They think things and did things that were bad, just abandon it. And so to me, that's their kind of worst intellectual habit that does drive me a bit up the wall.
I did want to add this, which is a little different. And I got this question. You're going to think it's odd, probably. But are all high school social studies teachers this well-read? I mean, every chapter is with a Toaster quote. But of course, that was your friend Corey. But, you explained that one. But you drop authors and book titles like people dropping celebrity names. You quote Socrates and Cicero. You talk about Dostoevsky and Nietzsche. You talk about Rousseau, the C.S. Lewis and Eliot, Adam Smith, the Bible. I mean, I don't remember, maybe I'm just too old, but I don't remember my social studies teacher in high school covering such a breadth of knowledge.
I think you are probably picking up on the fact that I am a big believer in a liberal arts education. I'm a big believer in being really well-rounded and having a lot of different interests and reading broadly. It's really, really nice of you to say that. And I will tell you that one of the things that does kind of worry me a little bit is, this lack of reading, the fact that books are being displaced by video games, and they're being displaced by memes, and they're just being displaced by thousands upon thousands of hours of scrolling. And I will tell you that, C.S. Lewis once said that we read to know that we are not alone. Thomas Jefferson said, a room without books is like a body without a soul. And it bothers me. And if you want to hear like a disturbing statistic, this is in the book. Our young people today are more likely to be reading books at 13 than they are at 17. My oldest daughter, who's going away to college in 3 weeks, when she was young, she was a prolific reader. And then when she got to high school, I know she just stopped reading. And I was really slow. I mean, this is a massive mistake I made as a parent. I gave my daughter a phone way too early. I didn't monitor it. And those habits of being able to sit there and focus. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I feel like the phones have ruined me. I used to be able to focus on a book. I mean, you said you read this book in one night. That's a testament to you. It's not to me. I couldn't do that. I don't think I have that kind of focus anymore. So that's very nice of you to say, but there are a lot of brilliant teachers out there. I will tell you, and this is, you talked about sounding odd. This is going to sound odd. So just kind of, I guess we'll end it on this, I think we all have a sense of our place in the world. We all kind of have hope about what our destiny is. And I really do pray every night that I've made a difference in the lives of my students. But I do feel like that everything that I've done in my teaching career and in my parental career or being a dad, I do feel like it's led me to this point that these things need to be said. And somebody needs to step up and get a megaphone and yell as loud as they can. And one of the reasons why I'm so honored to be on your show is because anything that amplifies that voice, I'm thankful for. And so this is a really, really difficult road that I need to walk on to get this message out there. But I don't think there's a more important one out there. So if it falls to me, a mid-career high school teacher, father of 3, to scream out, pay attention, folks, we're in danger, I'm happy to do it.
Coming up, my final segment with Jeremy Adams, author of Hollowed Out. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
The Charles Love Show continues on AM 560, The Answer. Here's Charles Love.
Welcome back. I've reached the final segment of my interview with Jeremy Adams, high school teacher, university professor, and author of Hollowed Out. the new book that is set to release on Tuesday, August 3rd. Please pick it up. In this segment, we'll talk about how I like the book so much that I am considering putting it in the list of books that I highly recommend and that I send to friends. And we talk about what some of those are. And then I ask him about the final unwritten chapter. What do we do? What is the solution? Here is our final segment. Well, I got to say that I've said this to a few of my guests. You quote some people I know in your book, too, like Ian Rowe, Rob Henderson, who was on the show. I know he's working on a book. Can't wait for that one. But I read a lot of books, and there's a lot of them that I like. But there's few that make the list of, promote it, buy it, give it away to people. And I'll give you a couple of them because I'm sure you're so well read. You've read some of them. One is The Coddling of the American Mind, Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt.
Jonathan Haidt, yep.
And then I got America on Trial, A Defense of the Founding, Robert Riley.
Right.
The Campus Race Frenzy, Casey Johnson and Stuart Taylor. And Jonathan Marks, Let's Be Reasonable, which is a fairly recent one. I think you talk at the end of your book, I believe in the acknowledgments about this being your magnum opus. Yeah. I think this was going to join my list. Really important book. But the last thing we got to say, it's not complete, though, because you weren't able to get in the solution and what we do. I know it's a warning, but what's next? It is like a horror film. It's like it's a cliffhanger and we don't know what's next.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got to make sure this book does well so I can write the next one. I'm just kidding. No, I think there are a few things that we need to do, and I'll just go through them kind of quickly. The first one is adults have got to start adulting again. We have got to put ourselves in the spaces of young people again. We didn't even get into this, the fact that young people live in a virtual world where adults can't observe, can't mingle, can't have any oversight. And we have got to take the phones away and we've got to start being adults again. The second thing is we need to tell young people you can be patriotic without believing your country's perfect. Being patriotic is not a declaration of perfection. And I think it's important to teach that middle ground. Third thing is I think it's really important to tell kids, look, guys, it's more important to have the license than the keys. A lot of young people, and again, another thing we didn't get into is this culture of radical individualism. A lot of young people talk about, I want to be free to do this. I want to say and do all of this. And yet meaningful freedom is the ability to connect ourselves to things that are bigger than ourselves. And connecting, I love this person. I marry this person. I want to have a family by this person. I love my country enough to work harder to make it better. I love my community, so I'm going to teach here. I believe in this political party, or I believe in this God, so I'm going to go to this church. The freedom to connect to things is much more important than the freedom to simply indulge yourself. And so that's why it's important to teach kids how to use their freedom. Give them a license. Let them earn a license before you give them the car keys. Fourth thing, make sure that we defend traditional aspirations. Not everybody wants to be married. That's fine. Not everybody wants to have a family. That's fine. Not everybody wants to go to church. That's fine. But at least expose them to the wonderment of it, the good things about it, the joy that it's brought human beings. I don't think people are different today than they particularly were 300 or 3,000 years ago. Human flourishing is essentially the same. And then finally, I guess the last thing I would say about, how do we fix the problem? I would essentially just say, read the book. just kidding.
No, that's a great ending. I mean, you got to push the book because it's important and people should read it. He is Jeremy Adams, a phenomenal high school social studies teacher and author of the new book, Hollowed Out, a warning about America's next generation. Jeremy, it's been great. Thank you for joining me.
This has been great. Thank you so much. It's great to meet you.